So what you and I have got to do is get involved. In order to do this, we're starting a voters registration drive. It's going to be the ballot or the bullet. After we get our people registered, we can then organize that voting strength and channel it in the direction that will get immediate results for the benefit of our people. The ballot, or the bullet.
Uhuru, we want to thank everyone for joining us. This is another blog from the Ballots or Bullets video blog. We have a special guest tonight for several reasons. There's a lot of issues we want to cover, but I think it's important that we have this discussion. I'm Brother Nandi Lumumba. My co-host tonight,
Brother Brandon for the Ujima People's Progress Party.
Thank you very much. We're going to have Sister Nicole Williams introduce herself and her organizations that she works with.
My name is Andress Nicole Williams-Muhammad. I am the co-lead for the Reproductive Health Alliance of Maryland. I am also co-director of the Nzuri Malika Birth Collective, and I am a national collaborator with Black Mamas Matter Alliance.
So we're going to talk about all the tie-ins with the different organizations and the different work that you do, sister. Let's talk about the Black Mamas movement. Tell us a little bit about that. I know that 2 weeks ago in Baltimore, there was actually an event coordinated at Drew Hill Park. I thought it was an outstanding event. I think it was necessary to have that voice, especially in this time when so many people are speaking for our community, and the real organic organizing that we do amongst ourselves really needs to be picked up. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization and a little bit about the idea behind the rally that happened?
Okay, now the event, the Black Mamas People's Assembly, was actually coordinated by several members in the community, two of which, myself and Tanae Harris, are actually members of the larger group called Black Mamas Matter Alliance. So even though we are members, the event was something that was solely based on us, not tied to the national organization. But what happened was one of the members of the larger Baltimore bird community wanted to host a rally or demonstration or just a gathering that was family friendly, but focused on all of the issues that a lot of people sometimes don't see tie in to what we call a reproductive justice framework, meaning that when we talk about reproductive justice for Black people, we're not just talking about the ability to have babies, but the ability not to have a baby, and the ability to have a baby when and where you want to, and the ability to raise that child when and where you want to. It was, when you say organic, and it was truly organic, because we decided early on there would be no leaders. There would be, no eyes in this we. Tanae was very intentional in trying to bring back what, for me, is old-fashioned community work, where you just decide you're going to do something and you do it, and you leave your ego at the door. It tied in housing, policing, maternal health, everything that we believed. And as you saw from the platform, we also tried to model off of the demands that we wanted, what we saw that needed to be done in the community. So it was a very peaceful and a very needed gathering. And it was, in a lot of gatherings of that nature, we decided that there would not be a larger or a push to create yet another nonprofit organization here in Baltimore, but that we decided collectively that we would support one another in the work that we do in the community. So that for me was something different. So we had people who had never worked together before, from very opposite ends of the political spectrum, from what they believe in spiritually, their economic backgrounds, educational backgrounds. So how that ties into what I do, especially with the Reproductive Health Alliance of Maryland, is really a coalition of other nonprofit organizations. And what we do is we specifically write legislation, support it, I guess, lobby for it, gather support. Of all the three organizations that I belong to, the one theme that runs through all three of those organizations is that all three organizations have a mandate that all leadership must be Black. All three organizations also have a mandate that Black leadership must also come from within that community or within a certain geographical location. And they also believe that in that space, there's no room for negotiation when it comes to Blackness. I was just on a call earlier today where we were talking about having our convention, and the membership voted that at all costs that we would keep what we call the pale people out of the conference. There was discussion about how politically correct that would be to ask on a questionnaire, are you Black or white? And we voted that no, all times we have to distinguish that we are Black. So now it's time for them to distinguish that they are white. And for me, that is a major step. So.
Thank you, Sister Nicole, and I appreciated all of that, especially the part you talk about, sending yourself and the group, the collective, into core identities. I've heard a ton of things. One of the things that resonated with me, and I'm sure Nanda can speak to as well, is the question of social maturity. Because often we see so many young sisters, women, particularly Black sisters, women as well, who have that battle with that social maturity wrapped up in the question of social and economic justice, and as well as the things you mentioned about nonprofits. So the question I wanted to ask you particularly is that what was the number one, if there is a top one for that matter, that kind of driven you away from the nonprofit model, considering that we live in a city now that does not have any economic solutions for Black women, children, and families particularly?
Well, two of the organizations all three actually, when I think about it, even though they are set up as nonprofits, two of them have set in our bylaws that we would not seek out grant money or grant funding from any outside organization that was not a Black-led organization. And that process had to be vetted. So even sometimes we also reject some funding, even that comes through here in Maryland through Associated Black Charities. Because when you go back to that, when you follow the trail of that money, it leads back to certain organizations. We chose not to do that. And one problem that we see with the nonprofit structure here in Maryland, specifically in Baltimore, is the idea that once you accept that money, once you accept that, you then become a part of that organization.
There it is.
The prime example of that is, and a lot of people don't notice it, but when you see Harriet and Janet Weinberg on the building,
yes,
people don't realize that organization is now part of the Harriet and Janet Weinberg Foundation. And that in order to, when you get their money, you have to allot a certain amount of your board membership from their board membership, so that they always will have a say in what you do because their members are on that board. Another issue tied to grant money is that oftentimes within our community, you cannot quantify or qualify certain aspects and nuances of how we do things. So if you can't prove it to them, it doesn't exist. But yet we know that it exists. We know that it happens. Just
right.
Going back to the event, we know that people enjoyed themselves. You know, we know that there were people there who would never have met or would never have worked together had it not been for that one period in the park at Druid Hill. We had people who live and work in Baltimore who had actually never been to Druid Hill Park.
Wow.
Who were organizing it.
Yeah.
Simply because of the spaces in which they move and operate. So if we were to take grant money for that, we would not be able to prove, you know, how can you quantify someone never going, coming, having been to Druid Hill Park and the significance of that.
Right.
So, and another thing with grant money, it runs out. When your issue is no longer the hot button topic in conversation, that money quickly runs away. And what happens is when these foundations fund programs and organizations within our community, they really drain our community of knowledge and energy, and, you know, they drain our community. And then once the money goes away, they go away. So the nonprofit structure is not sustainable.
Right.
And then what happens is sometimes in addressing one problem, because of the way funding is structured, that money has to go to that issue. But in the course of solving that issue, if you find that other issues exist, you can't address those issues.
Right.
Like in the work that I do as a doula, if I come across a family and a mom that is in need of housing, most programs, I would have to refer her someplace else. I could not help her.
Right.
So what we've done with the Birth Collective is we've taken on a traditional community-based model for how we interact with our families, meaning no matter where in the pregnancy they are, we are with them and available to them almost 24/7. If that mother needs help with housing, we help her. If that mother needs help with getting milk, we get it. And the reality is we would never get funding from the health department to run this program. Even though the Baltimore Community Doula Program is a part of the health department, we get no direct funding from the health department. And, you know, when it comes to health, another thing that a lot of people don't know about when it comes to the health department has, especially maternal and infant care division, has the grant funding and the Black grant funding that funnels from the federal government to the state and then to local jurisdictions. And then we have private insurances like Blue Cross Blue Shield, all of that. Well, they have a stipulation with these funders that unless your program is under Be More for Healthy Babies, you cannot apply for direct funding from those organizations. So, you know, if you're in my field, maternal health, you have to actually establish or work outside of the city in order to get any kind of grant funding. Because, you know, it's one of those it's not talked about, but it's clearly written when the grant announcements come out that if your program resides or supports people in Baltimore City, you are ineligible for this grant.
It's interesting. You've mined so many items that need to be dug into.